Christopher Sweat at Graystack Media. We're here in downtown Chicago. I'm sitting here with somebody I'd call a friend, Austin Berg. Some of you may have heard of Austin because I think you write some of the sharpest policy analysis and critiques of Chicago politics. And I really like your perspective on different topics, Austin. There's no expectation for us to ever agree on everything, so we've always been able to have an open discussion. So I wanted to bring you on the platform because you have a pretty loud voice in Chicago, and some strong opinions, but also some very well-informed opinions, and maybe we can just talk through some of that. Before we do that, maybe you could just introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Austin Berg, Executive Director of the Chicago Policy Center. I read a Substack called The Last Word, and I wrote a book called The New Chicago Way, Lessons from Other Big Cities. We'll probably talk about all that stuff.
And also, I think you showed a documentary and held a panel that I attended a couple months back. What was?
Yeah, we actually showed, for Chicago Policy Center, we screened a documentary called Drop Dead City.
Okay.
That was about New York City almost going bankrupt in the 70s, and what lessons can we learn from that? I think there's tons of lessons we can learn from New York City and many other big cities.
Yep.
But have also worked on a lot of other documentary work in Illinois. So right when I started my career, the biggest question from a lot of people in our community was, who is Mike Madigan and why does he control everything?
Okay.
And so one of my first real big creative projects was writing this documentary on Mike Madigan.
Sure.
And that was kind of my introduction into Illinois political culture. And it was like a rude awakening, and there was many difficulties as part of that project, but it was also really impactful. And we ran back a lot of that same process to create a documentary on the Chicago Teachers Union, which was the first documentary on that political machine, which I think is properly understood as 2.0 of what Madigan built.
Okay, which reminds me why we have so many things to talk about. And I will say that your last word, just for all of my friends in Chicago, is in my digest along with other publications like Fight Back Radio. You've seen our friend Richard Berg, who's not related to Austin Berg. So
no relation, as far as I know.
As far as you know.
Yeah.
New York war crimes, and then, maybe Bloomberg. And so I have a broad media digest. Your publication is in there for me. Anytime you write something, I read it. Let's just kind of let's kind of drill down a little bit. Just broad, what have you been writing lately? I know there has been a lot of debate in the community on some tax policy from the mayor, Brandon Johnson.
Mm-hmm. So we're in budget season in Chicago, and I think Chicago budget season's most accurately described by Drew Carey. Used to say this on Whose Line Is It Anyway, but it's basically the rules are made up and the points don't matter. Okay. We have no real budget process in the city of Chicago, and that's owed to the fact that we have no city constitution in Chicago. That's called a charter when it's for a municipal government. We're the only big city in the country that lacks this foundational document with checks and balances and process. So our budget process is really backwards and crazy, which we can get into. But one of the things we're seeing right now is a lot of tension between the mayor and the city council, specifically on a head tax proposal that the mayor is bringing up. So that's been very contentious since he proposed it about a month ago. We were first to report that a head tax was in his bevy of tax increases, and the amount of that head tax, and also critically, how it compares to other big cities. Because I think a really challenging part of our political culture in Chicago is that we have too much pride to be humble and look at what works in other big cities.
Sure.
And I think that comes through in tax policy, in our political culture, in budgeting, in so much, in policing, so many different elements of city governance. So the head tax, it's basically a $21 per employee tax. Chicago had a tax like this for many years, starting in the 1970s, but it was gradually phased out because it was rightfully seen as, why are we putting essentially a sin tax on something that we want a lot more of, which are job opportunities and employment for the city of Chicago. So we saw, and this is unprecedented, there's a lot of unprecedented dynamics in the city council, between the city council and the mayor right now, but one of those was a majority of city council members signing a letter saying we do not support this tax. We think it would be ruinous for the city of Chicago. We've seen the governor come out against it, and the House Speaker, Chris Welch, come out against it as being, it's taxing the exact type of activity that we desperately need more of in Chicago, which is job opportunities.
The head tax is to apply a tax to a company's head count
Yes.
that recurs monthly or annually?
I think it's paid annually, but it's
Okay.
charged up monthly. Maybe it's even paid monthly. But yeah, $21 per employee per month. So if you've got 100 employees, you're cutting a $25,000 check to the city
Just for
for the privilege of employing people. Yeah.
Okay. And I noticed in I don't remember which corporate outlet covered the head tax. So one of the politicians said large enterprises with 100 employees.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, 100 employees could be like a 3-site restaurant, which we know like a lot of 3-site restaurants are owned by like minority or immigrant communities that, they're taking their personal debts and leveraging that.
Their whole family, everything's in on it.
Their whole family,
Yes.
yep. All their personal safety and
Yep.
securities in their 3-chain restaurant here in Chicagoland. And I was thinking of other businesses like, it could be like some type of healthcare services for elderly, or even like folks with disabilities.
Yep, at home care.
At home care, yep. That's an easy 150 employee.
Easily. And it counts part-time employees too, so that's really important to know as part of the head count.
Okay.
It also doesn't count remote.
Oh.
So that's really at the heart of what's so backwards and unfair, I think, about this tax in particular, is that think about a 100-employee law firm
Sure.
and the margins that are being created by those 100 employees,
Yep.
and the fact that they could easily just live in the suburbs and be remote.
And quite a few have since the pandemic.
Sure. We have record high vacancy rates where we're sitting right now in downtown Chicago, 28% vacancy. So we need to every lever to encourage people to come back into the downtown core we have to use, and this would discriminate in favor of more remote businesses.
Yeah.
But compare that if you're a law firm that's making $50 million off a 100-employee headcount versus a restaurant that's making $5 million on a 100-employee headcount, you're both cutting the same check to the city. Actually, the law firm's probably not even cutting one because they'll make a couple employees remote and then they're good.
Then they're at 98.
Right. So blue-collar workforces are really disadvantaged by this.
Okay, and that is an interesting point, because I think a lot of our mayor, right, all of us here in the region that live in Chicago, our mayor, Brandon Johnson, likes to say that his policies are aimed towards the working class. But then when I look at it, when I hear some of the things you're saying, it doesn't seem to add up that way. Has that been a theme that you've noticed? Or like, is it this specific policy, you looked at this and you're like, okay, this is probably gonna have a disproportionate impact on physical labor, people that report to the office versus like some of the more professional services or consultants or...
I find that in this case, it's sort of working backwards from a political aim, which is, how do I pass a budget that I can credibly say hits corporations the hardest?
The billionaires.
Guess who's not a billionaire?
It ain't me. I live in Craterville, so...
And the people who have 3 or 4, yeah, you've seen them. The people with 3 to 4 restaurants in a chain
not
with
even
100
close.
part-timers and getting hit by that. And so I think perhaps, I don't know what's inside of his head, but there are people in his administration that are perhaps convinced that this actually does do that. But I really do think it's sort of a calculated, a political calculus. And they refuse to look towards city government for any kind of efficiencies. So they have to pick a tax that they can market as hitting corporations. And this one, to your point, ultimately that's all passed to consumers or passed on to employees. It's not hurting. It seems like corporate income tax. They don't pay that. That gets passed on to customers or employees.
Right.
And so it's obviously not helping the poor and disadvantaged. And the main, most helpful thing you could do to help people who are underprivileged in Chicago is to create a thriving, flourishing, growing city.
Sure.
And this tax, despite not even gaining that much revenue for the city, is just like a 5 red flag alert for any kind of big employer that's looking to locate here. Seeing that kind of talk, it's just a red flag. And that hurts everybody in the city. It hurts you in terms of not only the job opportunities that those businesses create, any social service, any program the city wants to do is financed by the success of those businesses. So you want to encourage them to come here.
Okay.
This doesn't.
Yeah. Okay, I see that. What else have you been thinking about? I know you get to opine on a lot of things. Let's do this. New York City. I came to the event. I listened to you moderate the talk. Could you take us through why you decided to host that specific documentary? And then, let's just talk about it.
I think when you look at how in debt the city of Chicago is, how much intergenerational theft is happening in the city in the forms of debt and pensions, it's such an outlier. 30 to 40% of our budget is going towards those fixed costs of debt and pensions.
Oh.
So if you think about
annually,
every single year. So if you think about what people think the city government is, which is these are the folks that pick up my trash and educate my kids and provide policing services. A huge chunk of what city government is in Chicago right now is redistributing money from future generations to older generations in the form of debt and pensions.
Okay.
That's a huge part of what we spend money on. And there's no plan.
Well, and to break this down
go
for
ahead.
people that may not fully understand, so if the city has an annual budget, do you know what the total dollar amount
So
was?
the proposal is like $16 billion.
So let's pretend that the city has an annual budget of $16 billion. Then we're basically saying that somewhere around $6 to $8 billion, $6 billion is going towards this debt service or this endowment of debt that is owed to.
We're siphoning off a larger and larger chunk of all the money that the city spends goes towards these legacy costs.
Yeah.
And so if you think about, for example, our property tax levy, everybody pays property taxes in Chicago. They're high relative to other big cities. Our commercial property taxes are the highest in the country. 80% of our property taxes just go to pensions and debt.
Wow.
80%.
So, and no wonder then you see systems that people will make arguments, whether we agree or not, even if we have different opinions. No wonder you see an underinvestment in the school system or in the road system.
100%.
Because where we don't have the money.
That's right. So there's a disconnect between the really high taxes and fees people pay and the services that they get, because the money's going to yesterday's services.
Yep.
And benefits that were too
it could be
expensive to pay.
Years ago of services that we're still paying off or
decades.
Totally.
Okay. And we even have income generating assets that we've sold the rights to for decades into the
sure.
future.
Like our parking.
If you think about parking meters.
Yeah,
exactly.
because a lot of people don't understand that. Was it Rahm Emanuel?
It was Daley, actually.
It was Daley?
Yeah.
He basically, he wanted to overcome a budget shortfall, right? And so his way of creating a liquidity event for the city of Chicago was negotiating with, was it UAE?
I believe there was some kind of
some
sovereign
type
wealth
of
fund.
entity.
It's either maybe Saudi or UAE.
Yes, some type of Gulf-based entity provided a one-time dollar amount for future access to all parking meters in Chicago. I think it's 10 years.
No, it's 70. It's decades.
Hold on, so
it's unprecedented.
How much money? Do you remember how much money they?
It was it was maybe a couple $2 billion. One maybe.
So $2 billion today for the
7
Daley admin in Chicago, for 70 years of our parking meters
revenue.
So it means even if we get a population growth, if we get more international travel and we get more people consuming our parking meters, we are fixed at that $2 billion or whatever that came in.
Or even say. I want to enliven downtown and we want more food trucks.
Okay.
But we got to use parking spaces for the food trucks. Every time you take out that parking meter, you either have to put a new one somewhere else in the city, or you're making an additional payment to this company.
Oh, that's not good.
So the worst part of that deal was not only the way in which it was done. It was basically a couple days in which this massive city asset was sold off,
Okay.
which is a huge problem with, as I said before, our budget process. There is nothing. There's no rules. It's Wild West.
Okay.
We spent the money in 2 years.
Oh no! And Daley got out in 10, or was it?
That's right. I think Ron was elected in 2011.
And by the way, a lot of people don't recognize this, but Saudi and Gulf-based sovereign wealth funds were actually doing bailouts before the Federal Reserve in '08. So I'd assume that the capital that was offered in 9 or 10 or whatever, '09, 2010, was a part of this wave of Gulf investors increasing their exposure to distressed assets in the United States. And this is one vector of what people would say is like a sort of like you're trading your sovereignty for very short-sighted kind of thinking. If you're selling your city property, our taxpayer property, to a foreign investment entity. And again, what we're seeing is like, for what benefit?
Sure. And so to the point though about New York City, an asset sale like, and why we showed that documentary, is an asset sale like that, if you were to do that in New York City, it would have to go through several committee hearings.
Yep.
It would have to go to an independent concessions, basically, commission. And it's probably large enough that it actually would have required a referendum vote of the whole city to say up
so
or down.
The people would have to vote on it.
The people would have to vote. All of those mechanisms, those checks and balances, those speed bumps to reckless decisions are instantiated in their charter. That's written, that's hard in law, it's in the Constitution. If the government violates it, you as a citizen could sue the government.
Okay.
Chicago has no recourse. This contract was made in the dead of night, essentially, between the city, a rubber stamp city council, and this private entity. And generations of Chicagoans, so many Chicagoans not yet born, are subject to this reckless decision. And that encapsulates so much of Chicago's political structure and culture in one thing. That's right. You've been here long enough to know when you say parking meter deal, people's eyes immediately, like it's red in their eyes.
No, and all politics, all backgrounds.
Yes.
Like
it's a penetration of that story and its salience is like it explains so much about what's wrong with our city. So in New York, a lot of those practices came from a time in which the city was almost bankrupt. And I mean,
was this the late '70s? The documentary we watched?
Early '70s, early mid-'70s, and
it was all primary source information in the documentary, right? Like
beautiful, beautiful archival footage of news footage. You can watch like Taxi Driver and see how bad like New York City was, right, in that period of time. But it's amazing to see news footage of truly like, I mean, the garbage isn't getting picked up. There's fires in the streets. Public safety is a huge problem.
Strikes, there were strikes.
Tons of strikes, teacher strikes, garbage strikes. But out of that, New York City has things like generally accepted accounting principles. It's called GAAP. It's actually one of the only big cities that has this, that are really hard and fast fiscal rules. They have a lot of things preventing reckless decision-making and budgeting. They're also actually permitted to go into Chapter 9 bankruptcy, which Chicago is the only big city we're not permitted to do that under state law. So I wrote about the fact that when Mamdani won the primary, the spreads on New York City municipal debt actually didn't move that much. Despite the rhetoric that, oh man, this guy's going to be freewheeling, spending, like dropping money from helicopters, right? The mayor of New York City has much more limitation on making really reckless decisions because of those lessons that were learned in the '70s in New York City. Chicago never learned those lessons.
Okay, and then this brings me to another like really amazing point that I don't think people fully understand. And this could loop into some of your documentary, but could you break down like what the Madigan regime influence to the kind of core regime influence means in Chicago political history?
Yeah, so the machine dates back to really Anton Cermak. And that's in the city of Chicago.
That's so interesting.
Way back. People know the name Cermak.
Yeah, for sure.
Running around the city. And his shtick was ethnic-based, division of the spoils politically, basically. And then that evolves through Daley. Daley's innovation is using a huge influx of federal dollars to finance patronage.
Interesting.
So if you think about like urban renewal or, like highway projects or things
Yeah.
like this, or federal housing development, right? So much that tens of thousands of patronage workers under the direct command and control of the mayor, and that's where his power came from. A young man who was a beneficiary of that, from when he was a kid, was Mike Madigan on the Southwest side. And what Madigan essentially did in becoming House Speaker of Illinois was he built a patronage army off of state and local debt.
Whoa.
So that was his innovation.
Was he funding it?
The state, we were funding it.
Oh, he was just writing the policy, or
He's
like
writing
influencing the policy.
Influencing the
that
policy.
That would issue the
giving
debt.
Exactly. And then divvying out the spoils.
And he'd leverage that for his political influence.
Exactly.
And for my academics and also my friends on Wall Street, we're talking about the political economy. Okay, keep going though.
Yes. So then you get into, now Madigan, when we made that documentary, or just before, the most common opinion of him.
The CTU documentary, or the core documentary.
We made the Madigan documentary in 2016.
Okay.
Which people can watch still at michaelmadigan.com, because he did not own his own
domain.
name. He was such an old school guy that he did not own his own name.
He can buy it from you for like 20 or 30. Well, I don't even want to put a price on it. But he could buy it if he wants.
I'm happy to take offers.
Yeah. No municipal tax issue or debt issuance.
Don't publicly fund that.
Yeah,
Definitely
exactly.
not. We won't take public money.
Exactly. Okay.
So we were making that documentary, and the reason was the most common opinion of Madigan statewide was don't know or no opinion. He was so under the radar.
Okay.
And that goes back to really the Daley years, where there's
You mean he would say he doesn't know, or he'd say he doesn't have an opinion?
Voters don't know, and voters didn't know who he was and had no opinion of who he was because he was so under the radar. And there's a really great book called Don't Make No Waves, Don't Back No Losers.
Yeah.
It's about the Daley.
I have it now because of you.
Awesome book.
Yeah.
One of the greatest book covers also of all time. So,
sure.
So cool. But that book was really about how part of Chicago's political culture is that if you make an unpopular decision, people will trudge through the snow in our crazy February elections to vote against you. But if you stay really behind the scenes, you can just kind of keep power for a very long time. And that's how Madigan operated. And that was in many ways, the source of his power. So,
and Madigan's influence spanned the state house and local Chicago.
Yes.
So, and for a lot of people, they don't recognize this. So if you're outside of Illinois, or if you're in Chicago and you don't understand, fortunate or unfortunate, Chicago has an extraordinary amount of influence on state level politics. And the conservative and rural, central and southern Illinois has to contend with that. Okay.
Very true. And so Madigan ultimately, after we had done a very large education campaign on his influence and his really harmful influence on the state, he left office with a 71% disapproval rating.
Okay.
And
he left as the speaker?
He was the longest serving House Speaker of any state legislature in American history. So I think
he's the Nancy Pelosi of Illinois.
Yes, times 10. I mean,
times 10.
He was 30. I think it was 30. Ended up 32 of 34 years where he was Speaker, and he was in the legislature since 1970. So he was a lawmaker for 50. So
and the idea is he was one of the most influential people in Illinois politics.
He had an autocratic rule over the legislative process at the state level.
Yeah.
To some extent, not as much at quite the city level, but he always.
And for my friends again that are trying to understand how these power structures work, this means that you might have a bill and you might want that bill to hit a committee and start through the policy process on the floor. But if there is a more influential person, they can prevent that bill from moving into the policy process or prevent it from escalating. And in a democratic government structure, we have a number of stakeholders that look at different bills and priorities. And, they'll work with external influence and local community influence and pressures inside of the chamber. And, different types of bills will escalate at different periods. Whereas it sounds like with Madigan's influence as the speaker, he could almost kind of decide which policies. Like he could pick and
That's
choose.
even up for debate, yeah.
Okay.
We actually had Illinois Policy Institute publish a report on his use of the Rules Committee specifically to basically just kill any bill on command.
Okay.
With
So
one-
that's an
one
open
person.
debate on
So
how
that
much
was-
influence.
Exactly, and that was a rule that was instantiated in the House, and there was a lot of law enforcement influence in that report specifically.
Interesting.
And Madigan, ultimately, the tagline in Springfield was Madigan would only leave Springfield in handcuffs or a casket. He's either going to die in office or he's going to get taken out by the feds.
Okay.
In fact, that's not what happened. Because lawmakers became more accountable to their constituents than they were accountable to Madigan, who funded all of their races, because he had become so toxic, he stepped down as speaker. He was voted out as speaker by his peers and stepped down himself. He was later indicted, and now he's in federal prison in West Virginia. So that documentary process was really interesting. He tried to depose me and two of my colleagues in court for creating the documentary, and the judge threw it out.
Yeah,
that
it's
morning.
free speech, and it's
Totally.
It's private. It's
Yep.
yeah. What?
So that was that was the only time that there was sort of a real interpersonal kind of like show of force that was attempted.
I see. But this
by
would
him.
just be another example of how he would treat dissent or opposition.
Totally.
While he was,
Yeah, exactly.
in
right.
essence, ruling.
Exactly.
Per se, right?
Right. And he was very interesting because he would never, I always compared him to Putin and Navalny. Putin would never say Navalny.
Yeah.
He'd never say
sure,
the
he
name.
never recognized him.
No.
But he did make sure he went to prison.
That's right.
And somehow Navalny
Somehow, yeah, exactly.
passed away.
Yes. So Madigan very rarely would ever say this, but then he would do things like that.
So Madigan didn't recognize his opposition.
Right.
Which, I do think, just to talk about this for a split second, because this is going to bring us to another topic, and we'll loop back, because we got to talk about core.
Yeah, CTU is the next, so we can talk about that. Yeah.
So we'll loop back. But this brings me to another point, is that executives or like influential politicians that say too much to their opposition and exacerbate tension reminds me of like Donald Trump. Because there is some benefit. Like for me, I think that you should try to have as best as possible of relations to opposition. I know a lot of politicians don't think like that. There is something to be said to like keeping those oppositional discussions to private rooms versus like Trump, where he like says something oppositional and information warfare starts. We get all these hacks and kinetic activity. Decision making goes out the door. People are in fear.
It's escalatory too.
It becomes escalatory, and then we see a lot of chaos in the community. So we'll get to that, but let's go back to now we're post Madigan. Where are we
Madigan's
at?
gone. The old machine is dead.
Okay.
And the new machine is the Chicago Teachers Union under leadership of this new caucus of rank and file educators.
Yeah.
So
also known as CORE.
Also known as CORE. So
and again, remember, we're talking about big picture, key political influence in the city of Chicago.
Yeah.
So we're going from Madigan to CORE.
That's right. So folks who are interested in this topic should watch our documentary, Local 1, which you can watch at chicagoteachersunion.com, because they, like Madigan, didn't own their own domain. So you can watch that there.
They all obviously are taking offers if they did want to buy the domain.
I'll give you an illustrative.
They'd have to liquidate another piece of real estate, though.
Yes, that's right. We cover that. So I'll give you like an illustrative story.
Okay.
So one of my close friends is this man named Joe O'Cool. And Joe was born and raised in the Philippines. And he fled the Philippines actually in a witness protection program after uncovering one of the largest corruption scandals in the history of the Philippines.
Whoa.
It involved redevelopment of a major airport with World Bank funds and cartels trying to get a hold of all of those contracts. And he blew the whistle, and he had to leave his home, and he came to Chicago.
Okay.
And
that makes sense.
Exactly.
We're the
normal
backup
American
market.
story. Exactly. So Joe comes here, and he's a teacher. He becomes a math teacher in Chicago Public Schools, and he started teaching at Marshall on the west side. And one day, one of his star math students was killed on the way home from school in gang violence for refusing to join a gang. And so Joe then went to class the next day, and he's looking basically at this empty seat. of this kid who he put so much love and time and care towards. And he said that day that his mission was not only to teach kids, but to save the lives of as many Chicago children as possible.
Okay.
And he was a great chess player. So he thought, I know what I'll do. I just read this study that said, actually the most dangerous time for kids in Chicago is not, 3 a.m. on a Saturday. It's like the hour after school. Like if you could have kids do something productive in that hour, this is why after school programming is so important.
Sure.
They could have better outcomes. So I'm going to start a chess club.
Okay.
He starts a chess club. First, nobody comes. Then he buys snacks.
Okay.
And everybody comes.
That's cool.
And so then something really amazing happens. He starts turning out city, state, national champions in chess out of the west side of Chicago. He's an incredible teacher.
Sure.
He goes down to the south side to Englewood to Earl STEM Academy, starts another chess team. They're turning the chess queen of Englewood, Tamaya. She's from out of his team.
Oh,
she's
wow.
Again, local, state, national champions.
Dang.
And one day, this is I believe 2016, Chicago Teachers Union calls a one-day strike.
Okay.
This was I still actually don't quite understand the rationale behind this. I think it was, in essence, a show of force to then Mayor Rahm Emanuel and then Governor Bruce Rauner to say, we own this.
And if I was analyzing it for the community and
Yeah.
I was here back then, I would call it blunt force coercive means, because the blunt instrument is to create a supply chain failure. And I'm not saying I'm not making a normative argument. I'm just saying supply chain failures create dramatic events where sometimes decision-making escalates immediately.
Mm-hmm. And that is a very, very common tactic of the CTU. I want to say, I'll get the right number for you. I think they've gone on strike maybe 7 times in the last decade, maybe
Wow.
6 times. I mean, it is very commonly used.
Okay.
That's a difference in Madigan, by the way.
Okay.
So,
Oh,
Joe,
sure. So Madigan was
Yeah.
more of an underground influence, where as the CTU influence was more public and maybe a bit more blunt force.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So Madigan was not withholding education services on a massive scale for a political end.
Okay.
So that Joe decides that day, because of his experience, that I morally can't.
And
do
we're
this.
talking about means and ends for anybody
Yes,
that,
totally.
yeah. Okay.
And so Joe says, again, like, this could be the last day I see some of my students. I cannot, in good conscience, do this. So he crosses the picket line.
Oh, really?
And he goes to school.
Okay.
And he teaches chess. And the next day he gets a strongly worded letter from the president of CTU and one of the founding members of the Caucus of Rank and File Educators, Karen Lewis,
Okay.
saying, give me one good reason why you shouldn't be expelled from the union.
Mm.
His checks start showing up late. He gets ostracized by his peers. And his chess team funding dries up.
Mm.
That's a machine.
Sure. Yep.
That's a political machine.
Yep.
And
Yeah, basically,
that
if you
was-
can use coercive means as some resort or even last resort to achieve a political end,
Yeah,
then I mean, you have power.
that's right.
This is not a weak entity
That's
that we're
right.
talking about.
So CORE started as basically a book club within the union of folks who they are self-described more radical, who saw the union as not being escalatory enough, not
Okay.
being radical enough under previous leadership.
Okay.
So Jackson Potter, Jesse Sharkey, Karen Lewis, and later Stacey Davis Gates and Brandon Johnson all came out of CORE. So CORE ran slates for officers within the union. They took over the union, and for the last decade, they've been in charge
Right. Of Chicago's
of CTU.
of CTU. Okay.
And with that role, they have become, over the last, if you just look at the last 2 years, they're the number one political spender in the
In
city.
the local politics.
Yes.
Okay.
Number one spender in mayor's race, council race. They fund more than half of the Illinois House at the state level, more than half of the Illinois Senate.
So for all my friends that are looking for all that APAC money in Chicago, well, for the last decade, it's been CTU as the top spender.
CTU is a big
In
political
Chicago
spender.
politics.
Yes, and I
Not
think,
not APAC.
No. So CTU, it's important for people to understand that its name, it's not really limited to Chicago,
Okay.
and it's not really entirely about teachers, and it's not even a majority of its spending has nothing to do with teaching. Just 18% of CTU's spending goes to representational activities.
Okay.
Those are the meat and potatoes sort of bargaining. I have a labor complaint. I go to my rep. They file a grievance for me and defend me
Sure.
in my job, right? That's traditionally what people think of when they think of a union's role.
Okay.
The rest of the money goes to politics, admin, leadership, priorities.
Okay.
That's the machine.
Mm-hmm.
So that money is coming from teacher dues and going into a political machine.
Okay.
That's how Brandon Johnson was elected. Now,
So, and
Yeah.
let me just simplify this for folks listening. So, the Chicago Public School also has a bureaucratic body, which people would know as like a school board. Okay. And then the Chicago Teachers Union, which you have different teachers unions around the country, decided that it should maybe express some more political influence and decided to structure itself in a way where it could not take over the school board, but express a great deal of influence in the school board.
yeah, I mean,
And on top of that, at the same time, achieve some political power in the city politics.
they have a lot of influence even outside the school board. So
Okay.
right now we're at an interesting time in Chicago history because we're transitioning from a system where the mayor appoints the school board
Oh, sure.
to it being elected.
Okay.
And we're in the middle of it right now where it's hybrid. The
Oh.
majority is appointed by Brandon Johnson. The other half is elected.
Okay.
And we could talk more about that. But their real power comes from ability to strike,
Sure.
which they are unique among big city teachers unions in being able to do. That's not the most common
Okay.
policy configuration of big cities,
Okay.
because people rightfully think this is a public service and we cannot risk it being leveraged for political ends
Sure.
by stopping the service of children in the schools.
Sure.
They also have collective bargaining, which is actually behind closed doors,
Okay.
essentially, with the mayor, with the school board.
Oh, sure.
And in Illinois, they have extraordinary power in
Okay.
collective bargaining that ultimately goes before like an arbitrator. So it's really an unelected, that's a source of power that isn't, nobody
And
elects that.
What gets negotiated in collective bargaining?
Traditionally, it's pay and benefits.
Oh, sure. Okay.
And that's how unions have always really functioned in the government
Yeah.
sector.
And again, I understand the necessity of some of these things.
Totally.
We're talking about the influence and how some
Right.
of these structures get abused.
That's right. Under core, the collective bargaining process has been opened up to any demand.
Oh, okay.
So this can include
Not even
things-
labor related.
No. Housing stipends for CTU members.
Okay.
The number and type of capital spending from the school district. We want certain schools like this being built. Critically, limits on school choice. So limits on
Okay.
new charter schools popping up. All embedded not in a piece of legislation that's passed by our duly elected representatives,
But a private
but in a backroom deal between a union and the government.
that voters and constituents really don't have control over.
No.
Okay.
No. So, and that was really the worry about Brandon Johnson being elected mayor, is that how can you be bargaining with the people who directly elected you and
Sure.
who you came out
Oh,
of their
sure.
organizing? So
Because it would be seen as a sort of
it's conflict of interest. It's
conflict of
massively-
interest.
Yes.
Okay.
So, but what's interesting is for many years in Chicago,
It's kind of like when George Bush made Dick Cheney the vice president.
yeah,
I mean, I'm being
Negotiating
tongue in
with
cheek,
himself.
but I mean, he comes from big oil and then we go to Iraq.
exactly.
Anyways, I understand what
Yeah.
you're saying. I just wanted to give an example people
Yep.
know about.
Yep. So CTU for many years was very popular in the city of Chicago for the simple reason that their name is the Chicago Teachers Union.
Sure.
We love Chicago, we love teachers,
Yep.
and Chicago has a really strong labor history. So that was 60 to 70% favorable for decades.
Okay.
And that really constrained city government in terms of being able to bargain effectively for different options for kids or changing the school day or things of that nature.
Because the teachers union had a sort of popular support in the public.
Huge popular support in the public, especially
Okay.
Karen Lewis, who is
Okay.
a former president. and many people were encouraging her
And
to
so
run
there
for
is
mayor.
some political savvy in this group. Like if you're acquiring power and doing these side negotiations,
They're totally,
like,
yes.
you do have to be a skilled practitioner at some point to manage these levers of power in these gray areas.
Certainly.
And get elected.
And there's been, but there's been a big change.
Okay.
So in the last 18 months, the most recent number I saw was CTU is at 28% favorable in the city of Chicago.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
So
So the
they've
popular
become-
support.
Completely has inverted, and it's become toxic politically
Okay.
because I think of appearance of corrupt and undue influence on the mayor's office, on policy in the schools, and just on a lot of belligerent remarks from the president, Stacey Davis Gates.
Okay. And also
So-
the spending didn't equal like a lot of new candidates, did it? Or like a lot of new electeds?
I think in the city council, if you look at a lot of the socialist candidates who have gained office, most of them, if not all of them, have had CTU support.
Okay.
So they have had influence in getting people elected. However, we saw for the first time last year 2 elections where their influence had downstream political effects that were not to their ends.
Okay.
So the first was a tax increase proposal called Bring Chicago Home.
Sure.
It was supposed to be a tax increase on real estate transactions to fund homelessness services.
Okay.
A few weeks before that election, a list of contract demands came out from the union to the mayor, one of which was housing stipends.
Okay.
Which-
oh.
And zooming out, teachers deserve to be supported.
Sure.
We need to have a healthy teaching workforce in the city of
I agree
Chicago
with
to
you.
attract families.
I agree.
All
with you.
that, make sure I'm caveating that. Like we
Yeah.
shouldn't be paying teachers minimum wage. Like that we deserve teachers should be paid well.
Yeah.
But that issue, when you have the mayor saying, hey, it's going to go for homelessness, but my biggest campaign donor is already asking for it, for housing for them, that played a big part in that election. And that tax referendum failed.
Okay.
And that was a huge priority of CTU.
And so they tried to bring the pork in as the housing stipend? And do you think that they might have gotten it through if they didn't try to pork
Yeah.
it up?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
The problem is there's such low trust in city government in the state of Chicago because things like parking meter deal that you have to really steelman your case for
Okay.
any kind of new money. And they
Yeah.
didn't do that.
Because that's one thing I
They
noticed
engendered
about.
fear and they engendered uncertainty. Yeah.
Okay, now, but one thing I have noticed about Chicagoans, even though maybe Chicagoans have been here, who have been here longer than me, don't notice this. But I think we debate our politics, and people are not afraid to litigate in the media, in some of the public discourse, in the research, even if it's not like reaching the masses. So, like, somebody throws some pork in, of course, that's going to catch attention of a few stakeholders, and it's going to start a debate.
That's right. And it confirms there's one of the mental models that's kind of a problem in Chicago among voters is it's like a 3-step process. 1, the whole system's corrupt. 2,
Okay.
there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
3, shrug my shoulders. That's a
That's a
median
tough
voter.
environment.
It's very tough. And I think
Okay.
one of the important parts of our work is defeating apathy by giving people an actual set of solutions that would fix this.
And also, apathy
So-
makes it easier for a smaller set of stakeholders to monopolize the policy-making process.
And that's a huge way that CTU has been able to have influence in municipal politics because we're the only big city in the country that has our elections in February of off years.
Okay.
So it cuts turnout in half.
Okay. And remember, again, CTU's political influence, which, again, you can bring your own money. JB brought $100 million of his own in the last election. Trump brought some of his own money. People will bring their own money, or they'll bring money that they're connected to get the political influence or to get the ball rolling. CTU got its political influence by liquidating one of its apartment buildings.
Well, yeah, part of it,
One of its real estate holdings, I should say.
their biggest chunk of money comes from dues from teachers, which is
Okay.
like $30 million a year.
Okay.
They also they owned a skyscraper in the Gold Coast that was originally meant to be used for housing for low-income teachers
Yep.
that they sold and made tens of millions of dollars on, and then that's how they paid for the new headquarters in the West Loop.
So they liquidated the housing to get a portion of the capital plus some of the teachers' dues. They allocate this as the means to achieve their political influence. And so this is how we went from Madigan, and after Madigan came core / CTU.
Right.
And we're, the question I think we're wondering in Chicago politics too is like, are we at the end of the core influence and moving into a new wave?
That's so those 2 elections last year, one was Bring Chicago Home. The second was this first time ever having school board elections.
Okay. Ever?
Ever. We've never elected our school board members until last year.
2024.
That's right.
Okay.
So
that's fascinating.
It is fascinating. New York City is actually the only other big city where the mayor directly appoints. So
school board.
We just switched that. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And New York may switch that soon too.
Okay.
So nationwide, if you're running in a school board election and you have the teachers union endorsement, you win 70% of the time.
Okay.
There were 9 competitive seats on this school board, most recent school board election. One was uncontested. So among those 9, C2 should have won 6 or 7.
Based on how they're set up.
Nationally, yeah. Nationally,
how they perform.
If the teachers union is behind you, most of the time people are like, I support teachers, I support the candidate.
Sure.
That didn't happen in Chicago.
Okay.
They lost 6 of 9 seats.
Oh,
and they spent millions of dollars on candidates who lost.
Yeah.
So,
which is a combination of different types of money from liquidation events, teachers' dues, like money that also could be maybe going into resources that teachers need.
100%.
Not to try to blunt anybody's political influence, but at the same time, if your influence is not adding up to the things that you're calling for, then maybe that's why the popular support is waning.
Yeah, and I think also transparency for their own members. So a really interesting storyline to follow over the next couple months is that a group of CTU members is actually suing leadership in court for their failure to produce audits for the last 5 years running, despite members asking for that.
Okay.
Because they've seen so much money moved around so quickly.
But not to the teachers.
But not to teachers.
Yeah. You said political ads.
Political ends. But
ads
too.
Yeah, sure. Various spending on political activities.
That's right, yeah. So I think between those 2 elections, you see lawmakers look at that and say, this used to be a Teflon political machine that you could not stand up against. But they just lost on 2 of their biggest priorities. And they don't have infinite money.
Sure.
So between the public support waning, that leading to election losses, and a lot of money spent on candidates that didn't win, you see their influence start to falter in city council and also in Springfield.
Okay.
So that's changing.
Okay. And I noticed that the mayor, as the executive, not critiquing him on any other terms, right? Because we got to be able to critique our executives. The mayor as an executive doesn't do a very good job of getting popular support from the legislative body, the city council. So like he'll have a bill, maybe it's good, maybe there's something interesting in there. And then the council will vote against him like 35-15 or something. So like he doesn't even have large blocks of support in the city council to.
That's right. And
if it even goes through the legislative process, because what we've been talking about is there are many ways that you can get Chicago politics done without the legislative process.
That's true, yeah. And we do see unprecedented council independence. We saw this last year. This was another thing in 2024. The mayor proposed a $300 million property tax hike, and the city council voted 50-0 against the mayor.
Okay.
To give you a sense of our political structure, or lack thereof, because we don't have a city charter, means that the mayor is the king.
Okay.
He's the autocrat, or he's the caudillo in South American politics, like the strongman mayor, and that is our system. He's the sun, and everything else is the solar system.
Okay.
There has never been a 50-0 vote against the mayor in the history of Chicago.
Okay.
And again, his political muscle is the CTU, but they are becoming increasingly toxic with the public.
Yeah.
So that's affecting his ability to get things done in the city council, for
Okay.
sure. Ultimately, though, we do want a stronger legislative branch.
Sure.
Right now in Chicago, our city council is not filled with legislators. It's filled with
Small oligarchs?
Yeah, small oligarchs.
An emirate?
The mayor is the big king, and then the council is are the emirates, where they control ticky-tack stuff in their wards.
Yeah.
They
Like,
don't
they have an
control
inordinate amount of control in the ward.
exactly, which is why so many of them go to prison. We've had
Yeah.
more than 30 since the 1970s go to prison.
30?
Yeah, because you as a small business person depend on at least the ambivalence of the
course.
alderman in order to get things done.
And it
So
turns
people
out
grease the
that
skids, and then they go to prison, and then aldermen go to prison. So
okay, because
need
they're selling their control
influence, exactly.
or influence.
Yes.
Both.
So the
So
council.
we need reform.
We need to reform. The council should be empowered to be more independent. So we talked about this budget, billions and billions of dollars. The council has very little ability to even analyze it.
Okay.
They've got
So
an
if they
office
even
of
wanted
3
to
or
vote
4
on it,
people. Yeah. If
they don't.
they don't have the resources to research, propose alternatives.
Okay.
That's very difficult for them to do. All the cards the mayor holds.
So the mayor can muscle them.
Yes.
And
big
then
time.
this is why you see so much conflict in our local body,
Well,
our local political body.
we used to not see. What's funny is people sort of, anytime there's council independence or conflict with the mayor, they say, oh, this is council wars 2.0. This is like when Harold Washington became our first black mayor and white leaders in the council were pushing back on him.
Okay.
But really what's crazy is that there's not more contentious. There should be contentiousness
Sure.
between the executive and the legislature.
But there's not.
But there's typically almost none.
Okay.
And our executive, our mayor, is far too powerful in Chicago. And when we wrote that book, that was a main finding, is that our mayor, so many poor decisions over so many decades came from a mayor with unconstrained power.
Right.
And we criticized every mayor.
Yeah.
So I'm not, I
and
think
we-
it's not fair to just say this is only Brandon Johnson.
Exactly.
This was Lori Lightfoot, this was Rahm, this
Yeah.
was Daley. All of them.
And also
in some
just kind of
sense,
the
have made
power
poor
vacuum that
decisions.
came after Madigan. And then also just thinking like we're all dealing with the failed infrastructure, the increases in rent, the high cost of operating small business, the failures of the public education system, police abuses, issues with taxes, the complexity of like, if you're not a practitioner like you or myself or like some other folks that we know, how do you even influence policy? You may have a really good policy, but like because it lacks transparency, like how do you look out for your community in this kind of political scheme
That's
that we
right.
have in our town?
Yeah, and things move so quickly. You talk to any lobbyist in city council and ask them about the process for how a bill is introduced. There's instances where people in the city council are voting on legislation that no one in the public has access to, that they're voting on.
Mhm.
That's just one, kind of wacky example. But,
Yeah. And again, CORE's influence is waning, and we'll have to talk about this again because I know that we need to wrap. But I think what we need to talk about as we get closer to our municipal election, which I think we're still, 16 months out?
yeah, February of 27.
Okay. What we need to talk about is like, is CORE the contender past this next election? And if not, what is the future sort of influence? And I don't know, maybe there's a potential it becomes more distributed, or maybe it's another concentration. Well, who is that post-Madigan, post-CORE concentrated influencer? And then, another thing I'd like to talk to you about soon too, and we'll also get back to this, is like more about the city charter.
Yeah.
Like why good governance is so important at all levels of government, but especially Chicago. And then why you might frame your comparatives between like major metros, New York, Los Angeles, like why you compare our competitive nature to them. And then, what's the future state that you think about, or that, is like, I'd love to talk with you about like, what's the future state of Chicago.
Anytime,
politics.
man. Yeah, anytime.
Okay.
Thanks, dude.
All right. Been amazing to sit down. Again, Austin Berg, Chicago
Policy Center.
Policy Center. And the last ward,
Yep.
which is a great name, by the way,
Thank you.
especially after this conversation.
Thank you.
And we'll talk again.